Hello and welcome to episode 9 of This Much is True Crime with me, Martin Frizzell, and my colleague, Emeritus Professor of Criminology, David Wilson.
I
It's
do
a
like
mouthful, isn't it?
I do like the whole title, Emeritus Professor. Although I've never been able to work out if I'm Emeritus Professor or Professor Emeritus. So I just use them interchangeably now myself. I don't care.
Do you actually use the title? I mean, does it get you an upgrade or a better seat in a restaurant or anything? Never mind it's Professor, it's Emeritus Professor. Would they even know what it means?
No,
To be honest, I had to look up what it meant. I didn't know myself.
No, and to be honest, I think it's the sort of thing that universities give to professors in my situation who are retiring. And because they give us an emeritus title, it means that I'm still connected to that university, and therefore I can go back and give lectures, and they can still say I'm connected to them as a way of advertising ourselves to students and to others.
Well, we're delighted you're sharing your wise words of wisdom with us lowly podcast folk. And just on the podcast, Madeleine McCann, the last one we did, has done
Yeah.
very well indeed. Actually, if you'd like to contact us, you can do through the usual social channels, and there's an email address on our site as well. And lots of comments about Madeleine McCann, the conspiracy theorists out in force, as you would expect. And that is the nature of this podcast. So this is about crime that is in the news now, whether it's actually happening or it's a trial as we're about to speak, or it's on telly and you're seeing lots of series and docudramas and documentaries about it. We try and talk through it and make some sense of it all, and just share our feelings about it too. And today we're going to talk about a trial that's very much ongoing. It's been on for several weeks and several more weeks to go, and it's P. Diddy, or to give it its proper title, it's quite grand, this United States of America
Uh-huh.
versus Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, which is his Instagram handle. And it's important we say right at the start that Mr. Combs refuses to accept any of the allegations. He says he's innocent of everything that he's been accused of, which includes racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. You've been looking into it, David. What do you make so far of what we've seen and heard?
Well, the first thing is, of course, what we're hearing is the prosecution. And therefore, there are quite clearly elements of the trial so far which are about the prosecution trying to establish very quickly the racketeering, the RICO element of the charges, which are these very strange charges that only came in the 1970s, which were originally and those charges were originally developed to take down the mob. As you know, Mark, we've discussed crime families on the podcast. No head of a mafia organization is going to literally do the dirty stuff themselves. They've got an organization beneath them, but the way, therefore, of these charges were introduced so as to be able to say this is a racket, this is an illegal enterprise, and therefore a lot of the prosecution so far has been about laying out how Bad Boy Records was this illegal enterprise, this corrupt enterprise, and having people take the stand who could say, we did use the corporate credit card. We did know we ourselves were asked to go and get hire sex workers for the freak offs and so forth. So there's been a lot initially about trying to establish that Bad Boy Records is a racket, and I was impressed only by one or two of the people who said that, partly because I'm so used to these charges having multiple defendants. If you think about it, that this is only about Sean Combs. Normally, when there's a RICO charge, you'll have 6, 8, 12 co-defendants, but nobody has been charged with Combs, and I wonder if that's because the government have offered to them immunity in return for their testimony, which is going to come down the line. What
Well, he
we've
was sorry, he was offered a plea bargain himself, and he turned it down. So he could have probably spent some time in jail if he'd agreed to accepting some of these charges, but he said no. And what's interesting as well, David, is that it's the Department of Homeland Security. It's not NYPD. It's not LAPD. This is the government. This is Homeland Security who've done the investigation on Sean Combs.
Well, and of course, people will associate Homeland Security with immigration. But remember, the Homeland Security is appropriate because of the human trafficking, the sex trafficking that form two of the charges, the federal charges. He's got sex trafficking ×2 and also transportation to engage in prostitution ×2. And Homeland Security are in a good position to prosecute that on behalf of the government. And remember, prior to Homeland Security taking the lead in the prosecution of P. Diddy, and by the way, aren't all his titles much better than emeritus professor? Um, quite apart from them taking the lead in his case, they were successful in taking similar charges against R. Kelly, another rapper who was found guilty not so long ago. So yeah, Homeland Security, people would be confused by that. I also think, Martin, I don't know about you, people are slightly confused as well by the fact that this is federal charges, not state charges. These are criminal charges, not civil charges. And yet there are something like 150 civil cases which seem to be ongoing at the same time, which drip feeds into the publicity surrounding the Diddyverse.
The man is a walking lawsuit, isn't he? I mean, from many years ago, there seems always to be legal issues surrounding him, and he's always sort of escaped the final call, the final judgment, which I suppose this is. Bear in mind, of course, we had that dreadful video that has been allowed in court with Cassie Ventura, his girlfriend, his former girlfriend, where he quite clearly in an hotel corridor, throws a vase or two vases at her and beats her up. And he came out and apologized for that. But she was one of the star witnesses in the trial just a few days ago. But it's still interesting, just to go back to the RICO,
Yeah.
the racketeering charge on him. It just explained to me because what they're bringing forward all sorts of new evidence that we haven't heard before. And as you said, as witnesses too. But they don't have to prove any of those accusations are actually true or not. It's a bit like they're allowed to just bring pretty much all the kind of thoughts, accusations from people in a brick by brick kind of way to make a case, which comes under the umbrella of racketeering. So nothing in particular has to be proven beyond reasonable doubt, but it's in the round. It's all of it, is it?
Well, the key thing would be that's an interesting take because I spend a lot of time talking to people about this now. The key thing would be in terms of what they're doing, the prosecution are doing, are trying to get this element of force, fraud, and coercion into the evidence that they're bringing forward from various people who've given evidence. That the racketeering, the corruption has to come because the person on the stand says they were forced against their will to behave in a particular way. They were coerced in a particular way to behave as they have done. And that's what they're trying to get at. And remember, you mentioned the Cassie Ventura video, which is horrific, but he's not being charged with sexual assault. He's being charged for other things. And Cassie Ventura settled her civil case with P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, her partner. And it was only after the case was settled the federal charges were brought. So what they're trying to get at is this idea of coercion, that this organization coerces people into behaving in a way they wouldn't normally behave in. And it's not just about finance. You're paid to do this. It's that you're coerced to do this beyond the fact that you are an employee or in a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner relationship.
And what his lawyers and the defense will no doubt, bring in their side of the story quite soon. But they're saying everything was consensual.
There you go.
They'll be telling the jury now. Yeah, sure, that video was awful. He's
Yeah.
apologized for it. but you have to take Mr. Combs as having a different lifestyle to the rest of us, and maybe some of the things he does may seem debauched to you. And yeah, we don't say they're not, but that's the way he lives. And quite frankly, the prosecution, they will allege, is basically trying to frame him for just his lifestyle, but making it criminal, which it's not.
Okay, and without doubt, consent is going to be raised by the defense at some stage, and we'll see if Sean Combs himself is prepared to go into the stand to talk about consent. Remember, though, he originally denied that he had ever harmed Cassie Ventura, and then had to make that very public apology for the fact that the video was then made public. So the key elements are the coercion, the force that's behind these freak-offs, because that's why they even get into the detail, Martin, about it was employees of Bad Boy Records who used the company credit card to buy the baby oil, because then the baby oil being bought by the company credit card shows that there's a racket, that there's something that's an illegal enterprise, because people are being transported for prostitution, people are being sex trafficked. So that's what the prosecution are currently outlining. And I have to tell you that having listened to a lot of the evidence, I was slightly kind of sanguine about whether or not the case was going for the prosecution, until this amazing guy, a stylist called Deontay Nash, whom I have never heard of. Deontay Nash seemed to put nails in Sean Combs's coffin every time he opened his mouth, because it was quite clear that we suddenly heard for the first time, we'd heard Cassie Ventura, and the defense are going to say, well, she would say that, wouldn't she? But here was somebody else, Deontay Nash, confirming what Cassie Ventura had said, and that spoke to the coercion and the force that's necessary for the prosecution to prove.
And his evidence is crucial and actually the most believable, because working in the industry, perhaps not at Sean Combs' level, but certainly with some very famous people and their glam squads, of which the stylist is one of the most important, if not the most important person. You just know very famous people confide and have the stylist as their best friend, basically, on lots of shoots, on lots of television shows. They're always there, and literally they are the inner circle, the true inner circle. And if you ever want to find out, what the real stories are, it's the stylist or the hairdresser or the makeup artist who will have them all. And you find that for many years, these people will stick with the same group of glam squad personnel because they trust them implicitly, because they know what's in the closet. So his evidence will be crucial.
And Deontay Nash was literally saying that he witnessed Combs coerce Cassie Ventura and beat Cassie Ventura. And he said, I had to jump on his back to prevent him from continuing to attack her. And then he gave evidence which said, because Cassie Ventura had been really badly hurt, Combs, he said, according to Deontay Nash, Combs said, oh, don't take her to the hospital, get a doctor, go and see so-and-so who knows how to get a doctor to come in to give her stitches effectively. All of that sort of stuff is to the illegal enterprise, to the racketeering. That's why it's been very important to prove that beyond simply the evidence that Cassie Ventura herself has given, as compelling as that was. But did you also notice, I don't know how closely you've been listening to some of the people who've given evidence, it's almost like cult-like. There are people giving evidence against Diddy and then saying, and I still love him, I still think he's a great guy. And you do begin to feel some element of the way he was able to influence people beyond simply paying them an income.
And he, by some accounts, with some people, he ran his operation, which was described and linked to be almost like a nation state, as a dictator. His tentacles spread far and wide. I mean, this is a man and the values range from 400 to $900 million worth. He's the only rapper, as far as I know, who has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's won Grammys. He's won many awards. And funnily enough, one of his most revered songs that probably propelled him to stardom, certainly in this country, is "I'll Be Missing You," which was about Big and Narcy, which was a tribute to him. But it was ripped off, literally the whole thing, from The Police. "Every Breath You Take,"
Yeah.
exactly the same riff. And Sting, I think, at one point had to sue him to get the money. He never asked Sting if he could do it. Couldn't sample it. It was more than sampling. It was pretty much the whole thing. But Sting and him have come to an arrangement, which I presume, Sting gets the money for pretty much every time it's played now because he wrote it. I tell you who's really angry about it, if you look into it, is Andy Summers, who's the guitarist for The Police. He said Sting came to him with the song. It was on a cassette or on a very simple version done on a Hammond organ or Hammond piano. And it was Andy who actually put the guitar, that very, very famous, there have been 2 billion downloads on Spotify of this song now. And he doesn't really get anything for it, but he put that bum, 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 bum. He put the guitar lick onto it, which P. Diddy just ripped off and forms the basis of his very famous song. So right from the start of him becoming a recording artist, he was involved in a lawsuit of one way or another. So yeah, you're right. He's brought this whole kind of grouping around him to this stage now where people genuinely do have an affection and a love for him, but they put up with it. And I'm just wondering when the trial finishes, guilty or innocent, is anybody going to look into those who kept quiet, who didn't put their hands up and say, yes? I mean, where are we with the whole Epstein thing or Weinstein thing or the Me Too generation? Did he just kind of sort of sail through this without anybody thinking about him?
Gosh, that's such a good question. And can I just add, though, to your outline there about the wealth and so forth at Hollywood, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I remember Obama talked about how important P. Diddy was. So the president of the United States was also endorsing P. Diddy, which gives
David, but David, I mean, just 24 hours ago or less than that, the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, was asked, because he's been friends with him as well, pictured with him many times. He was asked, if Diddy is guilty, will you give him a pardon? Donald Trump said, let's wait and see what the facts are. So he didn't even rule it out.
Oh, gosh, I'd never heard that. I didn't know that Trump... Well, listen, Trump was... RICO laws are not just federal. States can have RICO laws. And at one stage, President Trump was under RICO investigation by the state of Georgia for the state of Georgia claiming that he interfered in the presidential election, how the state of Georgia conducted the count within the presidential election, which Trump lost. So those charges were eventually thrown out, as you will know. So yeah, Diddy is part of the powerful man within American culture who increasingly is being challenged by various states and by various laws. So you mentioned Epstein, we could mention Harvey Weinstein, we can mention Ghislaine Maxwell as well, and R. Kelly, for me, seems to be the key person to think about in terms of Diddy. What will happen if he's found guilty? Well, if he's found guilty, and remember, we haven't heard the defense yet, then he spends a lot of time in prison. He could spend the rest of his life in jail. And at that point, what would his life be like? If he goes to a supermax prison where he's going to be locked up for 23 out of every 24 hours, I think that life would be very different from him. So if he goes to Florence in Colorado or Marion, Illinois, that would be one kind of incarceration which would be problematic for him. But if he goes to just an everyday state penitentiary, because of his wealth, I don't think he'll have too bad a time, actually. But there's another guy in the background, Martin, about what's going to happen about all those people who were quiet. Remember, there's this guy, this Houston, Texas lawyer called Tony Busby, who claims to have over 150 people that are going to come forward with civil claims in relation to what happened to them. And he, Tony Busby, is currently sending out materials saying, we can settle this now. You stayed quiet. We could settle this now. I've got a client who said that you were at one of these freak-offs. So I think there will be more to come, but we have never seen an Epstein list, have we? We've never seen that.
No, and Diddy's, it's important to say Diddy's lawyers are saying that all these people who are coming forward with these civil cases now or accusations are gold diggers. They say, you know, Diddy is innocent of pretty much all these things. And some of these people are accusing Diddy of when they were underage of doing things, which again is a whole other can of worms in that respect. I'm interested though in the psychology of someone like Sean Combs, Puff Daddy P, Diddy Diddy PD Love, aka. Is he? I mean, I presume he is a bona fide psychopath.
It's always very difficult. You know, I get very reluctant to diagnose people from afar. It's very difficult to do that. And although there might be a prima facie case in terms of his risk-taking behavior, in terms of his lack of empathy, the video with Cassie Ventura would point to some of these things. The desire to have power and control, but no responsibility. All of those things are indicative of an underlying personality which might be characterized as psychopathic, but we just don't have enough information in terms of the man himself in a clinical setting where one would be allowed to be able to come to some kind of conclusion, which I would be comfortable about endorsing. What's interesting, though, is that a lot of what is now emerging is that these behaviors predate the the bad boy records. These behaviors predate Sean Combs becoming this multimillionaire, billionaire by some counts. So we're beginning to hear that he had problems with violence whilst he was at school, whilst he was at university. So a lot of these behaviors are ingrained behaviors, and I'd like to hear lots more about that as well.
If not a psychopath at the moment, what about a narcissist? Can you see signs of that coming through from what you know?
Listen, you and I, more so yourself, we work with people in the media all the time. And you know it's very, very difficult sometimes not to be caught up in your own publicity. You know, you've got to just stand back and be a bit more sanguine and pragmatic about things that are being said about you, how great you are. You know, I kind of, because both of us are Scots, we tend to be really against tall poppies, don't we? We hate that kind of tall poppy syndrome in Scottish culture. And so it's difficult sometimes to know where the narcissism really at a clinical level will come in because he's surrounded by people who he's paying for, who want to be part of his entourage. Listen, I heard somebody say on the stand that when she got a speeding ticket, she could simply, from the New York police, she could simply say, P. Diddy's I'm P. Diddy's personal assistant. And if she phoned P. Diddy and gave the phone to the police officer would write off the ticket. You know, it's very hard not to be narcissistic in that culture, isn't it?
And is that the same personal assistant who's accusing him of raping her as well?
Yes, it is. It's the same personal assistant. And again, her testimony was really important because she said that she was coerced into staying in a particular location. Because remember, if you're looking at racketeering, if you're looking at illegal schemes, illegal enterprises, that sense of coercion, of kidnap, of being blackmailed, all of those things have to be brought into by the prosecution to demonstrate that the RICO charges are legitimate.
Why do we make awful people famous?
Wow. You know, because we're not prepared. Listen, it's really interesting, isn't it, that he wants to call himself love. Um, because we don't talk about those things enough. We don't talk about good things enough. We don't talk about the vast majority of people who are actually caring and responsible and want to make the world a better place. We talk about people like in this situation because we kind of sort of admire the risk taker. You know, our culture is about endorsing people who will take risks. We like people who take risks, who don't seem as if they're afraid to step out of the ordinary. So partly it's our fault too.
Now, obviously, the fact that he refused the plea bargain, uh, he obviously thinks he's got a chance. He obviously thinks he can tough this one out. And if he does go on the stand, it's going to be interesting because obviously he's a charismatic character. He's not going to get where he is without having something that people like and in some cases love. Can he sway a jury, do you think? It's going to be interesting to see just, I mean, they will of course have been chosen and they will have been asked a questionnaire, have you been watching stuff on the news? I presume almost no one, hasn't seen it. So I presume they answer truthfully, of course, but they will know who he is. I mean, can he, well, I was going to say, can he have a fair hearing? Uh, in terms of can the prosecution have a fair hearing? Because people will know and will like P. Diddy.
I think they've already made up their mind. I don't think, I've said in another context that there are always gotcha moments in trials. And whether it's part of the prosecution's case or not, Diddy's not being charged with sexual assault. The Cassie Ventura video is just so awful that I think that has already cemented people's view about what they think about P. Diddy. He'll go on the stand, I think, but he'll have to I just don't think a jury can ignore what they've seen with their own eyes. And remember, Diddy denied that he had ever harmed Cassie Ventura and then had to make this mea culpa through a PR agency about being at a low point and about their relationship being toxic, but nonetheless, that's the way that their relationship was. So I don't think people can ignore that, and I bet it was a gotcha moment down the line, months down the line. I think everybody will remember that video with Cassie Ventura, which was horrific.
It was incredible. And I'm sorry, and his apology just doesn't wash whatever he may say. I'm sorry, but that's just outrageous, the way he treated that woman and who knows, many other women allegedly that,
And men. Remember,
and
it's
yes,
quite
and men too.
interesting. It's quite interesting the sexual behaviours that are being alleged, and men and one at least one man has come forward to allege that he was inappropriately dealt with by P Diddy as well. So there's an indiscriminate nature in terms of what is alleged about his offending, and that again speaks to that sense of being all powerful. And something that doesn't get enough credit in the discussions that I've heard or read about is the Me Too movement. Women coming forward saying, this is enough, we have to call these behaviors out, is really where a lot of the intellectual bandwidth for making these charges, trying to take down these characters, has come from.
Well, let's see where it goes. It's kind of halfway through, and we'll come back and revisit this once the trial is over and we see what the jury come out with. You're pretty much convinced he's going to be found guilty, but let's wait and see. And certainly, it will be box office. If he takes the stand, it is going to be wall to wall. I mean, podcasting has, I think Joe Rogan is the top podcaster in the world in terms of his share, his influence. But he's been overtaken in the past few days, the past week or so, by a whole plethora of podcasts just about P. Diddy, pretty much transcripts of the P. Diddy trial. You don't have to embellish it in any way because the transcripts themselves are fascinating.
But never mind that, Martin. Where is our podcast? We've been trying to break into the top 100. Have we
And we have
managed?
Yes, we have. We were up at 60 something, almost hitting the 50s. Then we slipped down a bit because we hadn't done one for a day or two. But, fingers crossed. But again, out of 23,000 true crime podcasts, to be up there is very healthy at the moment. And if you're listening to us, then have a look at us on YouTube, ours two Glaswegian ugly mugs. We are filming this, so we are on there. The Madeleine McCann podcast did very well and is still doing well. And hopefully P. Diddy is too. As I said, the whole point of what we do, the whole point of This Much is True Crime, is that we want to sort of tap in to the nerve of what you're talking about at the moment. And many people are talking about P. Diddy. So let's see where this goes with him. But a few more weeks' time, we will have the full result of the trial. And it'll be interesting to see whether, you got it right. I'm not sure. I'm
Oh
just not
gosh.
sure about those kind of characters. And I appreciate, the video was awful and some of this evidence is just sickening, quite frankly. He's a violent thug. But the defense are going to say, you may think that, but nothing that's come forward so far is a crime that he can be found beyond reasonable doubt to be guilty of. So let's see whether the uh, the the gamble, I suppose, of the prosecution bringing forward on the racketeering basis actually works for them. Let's see how that goes.
Okay,
See,
well, I think I'm gonna go. He's definitely going to get guilty, and I think Deontay Nash, the rapper, kid somebody again. His evidence was really important. I think there's every chance of Diddy being convicted on this.
well, a few weeks to go. It's not over yet. David, thank you very much. Till the next time.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.